Crown of Cinders, Chapter 1, Embers and Shadows. Lyra Embersong's fingers danced through the air, trailing delicate ribbons of flame that wove together into an intricate pattern of a phoenix in flight. The fiery creation hovered above the long mahogany table where 6 guild members watched with varying degrees of appreciation. The bird's wings beat once, twice, then burst into a shower of harmless sparks that rained down before vanishing completely.
An impressive display of control, Magister Embersong,
remarked Elder Kalina, her thin lips barely curving into what might generously be called a smile.
Though perhaps more suited to festival entertainment than serious guild matters.
Lyra maintained her poised smile even as she felt the familiar sting of dismissal.
Thank you, Elder. I find precision often serves where brute force fails.
She brushed an errant strand of flame-red hair behind her ear, her amber eyes carefully neutral. The Fire Guild's quarterly assessment chamber felt particularly stifling today. Ancient tapestries depicting the guild's most celebrated moments hung from stone walls that radiated lingering heat from yesterday's initiate trials. 6 elders sat on elevated seats of carved obsidian, looking down at her from their semicircular arrangement.
The Council recognizes your technical achievement, Magister Embersong. Few can maintain such complex illusions with so little fuel.
His eyes, the color of hot coals, flicked toward the single candle flame she had used as her source.
However, we must consider whether such talents advance the Guild's standing among the elements.
Of course. Lyra had heard this critique in different forms her entire life. Fire was meant to consume, to dominate, to overwhelm. Her intricate illusions and controlled manipulations were viewed as curiosities at best, weaknesses at worst. Never mind that they required twice the concentration and precision of the typical fireballs her peers hurled about with abandon.
High Councilor Embersong's daughter continues to bring unique perspectives to our traditions,
said Elder Merrick, his voice carrying the subtle condescension that always accompanied references to her father.
I move we conclude this assessment with a Tier 2 recognition.
Tier 2? Again. Despite creating works of unprecedented complexity, she would remain ranked below mages who could simply produce larger explosions.
I second the motion,
Elder Kalina said, not bothering to hide her satisfaction. Lyra kept her spine straight as the remaining elders murmured their agreement. The 6th chair, her father's, sat conspicuously empty. High Councilor Doran Embersong was attending to urgent matters that apparently took precedence over his daughter's quarterly assessment.
Then it is decided.
Elder Purin struck a small gong with a flame-wreathed mallet.
Magister Lyra Embersong maintains Tier 2 status. This assessment is concluded.
The elders rose in unison, their crimson and gold robes shimmering with heat-resistant enchantments. They filed out through a door behind the dais, leaving Lyra alone with the guttering candle. Only when the heavy door thudded shut did she allow herself a moment of true expression. With a sharp gesture, she sent the candle flames spiraling upward, splitting and multiplying until it formed a constellation of burning stars across the ceiling. Each point of light pulsed with her suppressed frustration.
Tier 2,
she muttered.
For the 4th consecutive year.
With another gesture, she extinguished the lights, plunging the room into shadow. She gathered her materials, a leather-bound journal, several marked scrolls, and the stub of candle, and tucked them into her embroidered satchel. As she stepped into the corridor outside, the familiar weight of the Fire Guild's expectations settled onto her shoulders once more. The hallway bustled with activity. Apprentices hurrying to lessons, magisters discussing theory, servants carrying messages and materials. The volcanic glass walls captured and amplified the afternoon sunlight, giving everything a warm, golden glow.
Lyra,
called a voice that momentarily lifted her spirits. Zara Cinderkin, her oldest friend, wove through the crowd with characteristic grace. Unlike Lyra's controlled movements, Zara embodied the typical fire mage's exuberance. quick gestures, animated expressions, and an inability to stand still for more than a few seconds.
Well,
Zara asked, falling into step beside Lyra.
did they finally recognize your obvious superiority over the flamethrowers?
Lyra's lips quirked.
Tier 2. Again.
Those fossil-brained traditionalists.
Zara's outrage manifested as actual sparks in her short-cropped dark hair.
Your phoenix was exquisite. I was watching from the observation alcove.
Apparently, exquisite doesn't advance the guild's standing.
Lyra replied, mimicking Elder Pirin's grave tone. They navigated the busy corridor together, other guild members parting before them with respectful nods. Whether for her family name or her own reputation, Lyra couldn't be sure.
Did your father attend?
Zara asked, her voice softening.
Too busy with urgent matters.
Lyra kept her expression neutral, though her fingers tightened around the strap of her satchel.
The usual.
Zara squeezed her arm sympathetically as they turned into a less crowded passage.
He'll regret missing it when Lord Brightforge hears of your display. I'd wager your future husband would have been impressed.
The mention of Alek Brightforge sent an uncomfortable chill down Lyra's spine, despite the perpetual warmth of the guild halls. Their engagement, announced 3 months ago, had been her father's crowning political achievement. A union between the Embersong legacy and the self-made brilliance of the Inferno Circle's rising star.
Perhaps,
Lyra said noncommittally.
though Lord Brightforge seems to prefer more traditional applications of fire magic.
Still,
Zara persisted.
the engagement ceremony is in 2 days. Surely your father will focus on you then.
Lyra smiled tightly.
Surely.
They reached a junction where their paths would diverge. Zara to the training yards, Lyra to her private study in the Eastern Tower.
Don't brood alone all evening.
Zara warned, already backing away.
Remember, the Ember Festival starts tonight. I expect to see you at the Firelight Square by sunset, looking appropriately festive and not at all like someone plotting to turn the elders into toads.
That would be water guild magic, not fire.
Lyra called after her.
Details.
Zara laughed, disappearing around a corner in a swirl of energy. Alone again, Lyra continued toward the Eastern Tower. Her study was one of the few places in the entire guild complex where she felt truly herself. High Councilor Embersong had granted her the space 3 years ago, partly as acknowledgement of her mastery, partly to keep her unconventional work away from impressionable apprentices. The spiral staircase wound upward, each step embedded with tiny shards of ruby that glowed faintly in response to her presence. At the top, she pressed her palm against the door, feeling the enchanted wood warm beneath her touch as it recognized her magical signature. The circular room beyond was a sanctuary of organized chaos. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, interspersed with narrow windows that offered views of the city below. A massive desk dominated the center, its surface covered with open books, partially completed diagrams, and several specialized instruments for measuring magical resonance. Lyra set down her satchel and moved to the window, gazing out at Pyreholm, the Fire Guild's domain. The city sprawled across the volcanic plateau in concentric rings, with grand structures of obsidian and ruby glass rising like flames from the basalt foundation. Magical lights were beginning to flicker to life as the sun descended toward the western mountains. Preparations for the first night of the Ember Festival already underway. From this height, she could see beyond the fire territories to the misty borders of the Water Guild's realm, and further still to the floating islands of the Air Guild. The Earth Guild's massive stone formations rose to the north, while the subtle, shimmering boundaries of the Spirit Guild's domain were barely visible to the south, a reminder of the rigid separation that had defined Eldervale for centuries. With a sigh, Lyra turned back to her desk, fingers trailing over a hidden drawer built into its side. A quick spell, one of her own design that detected and redirected attention, ensured her privacy before she slid it open. Inside lay her most precious and dangerous possessions, books and scrolls from other guilds, a water text on fluid dynamics, Earth Guild architectural principles, air manipulation theories, and most risky of all, a thin volume bound in shifting silver-gray material that seemed to flicker between solidity and vapor, a Spirit Guild meditation guide. These forbidden texts had cost her years of careful negotiation, substantial coin, and no small risk to her reputation. If discovered, they would scandalize her family and potentially cost her position within the guild. But they had also provided insights that transformed her understanding of fire magic, allowing her to develop techniques that no pure fire practitioner had ever conceived. Lyra extracted the spirit text, feeling the familiar tingle as the cover responded to her touch. According to everything she'd been taught, her fire magic should be incompatible with spirit techniques. The guilds remained separate because mixing elemental affinities led to instability, magical backlash, even catastrophe. Yet she had discovered otherwise. When she incorporated spirit meditation into her fire practice, her illusions became more vibrant, more alive. When she applied Water Guild principles of flow, her flame constructs gained fluidity and persistence. What else are they wrong about? She wondered, not for the first time. A chime from the clock on her wall reminded her of the time. The Ember Festival's opening ceremonies would begin soon, and her absence would be noted. With reluctance, she returned the book to its hiding place and sealed the drawer with her specialized spell. She moved to a small alcove where a basin of enchanted water, another forbidden luxury, waited. Lyra washed away the lingering scent of candle smoke and magical exertion, then changed from her formal assessment robes into festival attire. A flowing gown of graduated colors from deep crimson to bright gold, designed to mimic flames when she moved. As she secured the ceremonial flame brooch at her shoulder, her mother's, one of the few possessions she had of the woman who had died when Lyra was barely 5. A knock at her door startled her.
Magister Embersong?
Called a young voice.
A message from High Councilor Embersong.
Lyra opened the door to find a nervous-looking apprentice, no more than 12, clutching a sealed scroll. The girl's eyes widened at the sight of Lyra in her festival finery.
You look like an actual flame, Magister,
the girl blurted, then immediately flushed with embarrassment. Lyra's expression softened.
Thank you, apprentice.
Mira, Magister. Mira, Colborne.
Thank you, apprentice Colborne.
Lyra accepted the scroll, noting her father's distinctive wax seal, the Embersong phoenix rising from a circle of flames.
The High Councilor requests confirmation of receipt,
Mira said, still wide-eyed. Lyra broke the seal and scanned the contents quickly, her expression carefully controlled despite the message's implications. Daughter, Lord Brightforge arrives tonight rather than tomorrow as planned. Join us to receive him at the West Gate before proceeding to the festival opening. Wear the family circlet. Your assessment results have been conveyed to me. We will discuss your continued technical focus at a more appropriate time. High Councilor Embersong, not father. Never that in written communications. Always the title, always the reminder of his position, and, by extension, hers.
Please inform the High Councilor that I will comply,
Lyra told Mira, who nodded earnestly.
Yes, Magister, and
The girl hesitated.
if I may say, your phoenix illusion today was the most beautiful magic I've ever seen.
Something in Lyra's chest tightened at the girl's sincere admiration.
Perhaps you'll create even more beautiful work someday, apprentice Colborne.
The girl's face lit up before she remembered herself, bowed, and scurried away down the spiral stairs. Alone again, Lyra moved to a tall cabinet in the corner of her study. Inside, protected by both physical lock and magical wards, hung the Embersong family circlet, a delicate band of rose gold set with amber and rubies, ancient beyond reckoning. Legend claimed it had been crafted in the early days of the guild's formation, when the first Embersong had tamed a wildfire spirit and bound its essence to their bloodline. Like most guild origin stories, Lyra suspected the truth was less mystical and more political, but the circlet itself was undeniably imbued with old magic. As she placed it on her head, she felt the familiar warmth as it adjusted to fit her perfectly, the centermost ruby glowing slightly against her forehead. The magic within it resonated with her own, amplifying her connection to fire in subtle ways that made her senses sharper, her control finer. She checked her reflection in a mirror of polished obsidian. The woman who looked back embodied everything a high-ranking Fire Guild Magister should be. Elegant, powerful, controlled. The perfect diplomatic representative of both her guild and her family. The perfect match for the ambitious Lord Alek Brightforge. Lyra's fingers brushed the circlet's central stone, feeling the magic pulse beneath her touch.
2 more days until the engagement ceremony.
She murmured to her reflection.
2 days until it's irrevocably official.
The woman in the mirror gave nothing away, her expression a mask of appropriate dignity. But inside, beneath the layers of training and expectation, something restless burned. A question she couldn't quite articulate. A sense that despite her rare magic, her privileged position, and her impending marriage to one of the most powerful mages in the guild, something essential was missing from her life. Something that couldn't be filled by advancement or achievement or arranged marriages. With a final adjustment to her gown, Lyra extinguished the lights in her study with a gesture and headed for the stairs. The Ember Festival waited, and now so did her fiancé. She would perform her role flawlessly, as always. But the question continued to smolder within her, unasked and unanswered. The west gate of Pyreholm stood as a towering archway of obsidian and gold, perpetually wreathed in decorative flames that cast dancing shadows across the vast plaza before it. On festival nights, these flames burned in shifting patterns of color, crimson to gold to vibrant blue and back again, a display of the Fire Guild's mastery meant to impress visitors and citizens alike. Lyra stood beside her father at the foot of the ceremonial platform, acutely aware of the political tableau they presented. High Councilor Lyra Embersong cut an imposing figure in his formal robes, the intense red of the fabric deepening to near black at the hem, as if he stood in a pool of shadow fire. His auburn hair, streaked with distinguished silver at the temples, was crowned with the masculine counterpart to Lyra's circlet, a heavier band with more prominent stones.
"You're late,"
he murmured without looking at her.
Apologies, Father. I came directly upon receiving your message.
He turned slightly, his amber eyes, so like her own, assessing her appearance with clinical detachment.
"The gown is appropriate. You've secured the circlet properly?"
His gaze flicked to her forehead.
Yes, Father.
She resisted the urge to touch it again.
Good.
His attention returned to the road beyond the gate.
Lord Brightforge's delegation approaches. Remember that this alliance strengthens not only our family, but the entire Fire Guild. His research into ancient flame techniques has tremendous potential.
And tremendous risk, Lyra thought, but did not say. Alek Brightforge's experiments pushed the boundaries of acceptable fire manipulation, sometimes into territories that made her uneasy. But her father saw only the potential for increased guild power and prestige.
I understand the alliance's importance,
she replied instead.
Then demonstrate that understanding with appropriate enthusiasm,
her father said.
Your assessment performance today suggests you still prioritize aesthetic elegance over practical power. Lord Brightforge may appreciate beauty, but he respects strength above all.
The familiar criticism stung, though Lyra's expression remained serene.
I will endeavor to meet expectations.
Before her father could respond, A murmur ran through the gathered dignitaries. In the distance, a procession had appeared on the wide boulevard leading to the west gate. A cavalcade of horsemen surrounding an ornate carriage drawn by 4 midnight black steeds. Flames danced along the carriage's gold-chased wheels, never consuming but constantly moving. A showy display of controlled power. Trumpets sounded as the procession approached, their notes magically amplified to echo across the plaza. Guards in the Brightforge livery of copper and gold rode at precise intervals, their formation impeccable.
Impressive,
murmured one of the guild elders standing nearby.
The Archmagus never misses an opportunity to display his resources.
The carriage halted before the platform with theatrical precision. A footman leapt down to open the door, conjuring a staircase of solid flame that somehow supported weight without burning. And then he emerged. Lord Alek Brightforge stood framed in the carriage doorway for a calculated moment, allowing the assembled crowd to absorb the full impact of his presence. Tall and broad-shouldered, he cut a commanding figure in tailored robes of deep copper with gold embroidery that caught the light with every movement. His hair, the color of burnished metal, was swept back from a face that combined classical beauty with masculine strength. When he smiled, the crowd sighed collectively.
High Councilor Embersong,
Alek called, his voice carrying effortlessly across the space between them.
How fortunate that my journey proved swifter than anticipated. I could not bear to miss a moment of the celebrated Ember Festival.
He descended the flame stairs with graceful confidence, each step firm despite the seemingly insubstantial material. As he reached the plaza stones, the staircase dissipated into sparks that swirled around him briefly before vanishing. Another carefully choreographed effect. Doran stepped forward, arms outstretched in formal welcome.
Archmagus Brightforge, Pyreholm is honored by your early arrival.
The two men clasped forearms in the traditional Fire Guild greeting, a brief flare of magic sparking where their skin met. A display of power disguised as ceremony. Lyra didn't miss how her father's expression tightened slightly. Alek's magical pulse had been deliberately, if subtly, stronger. Then Alek's golden eyes found her, and his smile warmed with apparent genuine pleasure.
And the incomparable Magister Embersong,
he said, approaching her with measured steps.
Rumors of your beauty failed to do you justice, as always.
He took her offered hand and bowed over it, his lips brushing her knuckles with perfect courteousness. She felt the whisper of his magic against her skin, warm and insistent, like a banked fire suddenly stirred.
Lord Brightforge,
she replied, her voice carefully modulated to convey pleased respect.
Your presence brightens our festival.
He straightened, still holding her hand, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that might have seemed romantic to observers, but felt assessing to Lyra, as if he were cataloging her features and reactions for future reference.
I bring a gift,
he announced, finally releasing her hand to gesture to one of his attendants.
For my bride-to-be.
The attendant stepped forward, bearing a small chest of polished redwood inlaid with gold. At Alek's nod, he opened it to reveal a necklace unlike anything Lyra had seen before. A cascade of gems that appeared to contain actual dancing flames within their facets. A murmur of appreciation ran through the onlookers.
Fire opals from the southern volcanic range,
Alek explained, lifting the necklace carefully.
Harvested during the last solar eclipse, and imbued with essence of elemental flame. They're attuned to respond to your specific magical signature.
As if to demonstrate, he held the central stone near her hand. When her magic naturally reached out to it, the flames within the opal flared brighter, shifting from orange to a deep crimson that matched her gown perfectly.
Extraordinary,
her father said with genuine admiration.
Such fine control of imprisoned flame elements.
May I?
Alek asked Lyra, gesturing to indicate his wish to place the necklace on her. Protocol demanded she accept.
Of course, my lord.
She turned slightly and lifted her hair. Alek stepped behind her, bringing the necklace around her throat. As he fastened the clasp, his fingers lingered briefly at the nape of her neck, and she felt a curious sensation, as if the magic in the opals was reaching beyond her skin, seeking something deeper. When he stepped away, the assembled dignitaries applauded politely. Lyra touched the central stone, finding it warm but not hot against her skin.
It suits you.
Alek said, satisfaction evident in his tone.
Fire complementing fire.
A most thoughtful gift,
she replied, the formal words coming automatically while her mind worked to identify what had felt so strange about the necklace's magic. It seemed to pulse with a rhythm just slightly out of sync with her own.
And now,
her father announced,
we shall proceed to the festival opening. Lord Brightforge, would you do us the honor of lighting the great pyre alongside my daughter? It would be a fitting symbol of our house's imminent union.
Alek inclined his head graciously.
I would be honored, High Councilor.
He offered his arm to Lyra.
Shall we, Magister Embersong?
She placed her hand on his arm, feeling the coiled strength beneath the expensive fabric.
Lead on, my lord.
As they processed toward Firelight Square, followed by the entourage of guild officials and Brightforge attendants, Alek leaned slightly closer.
I'm told your quarterly assessment was today,
he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear.
I regret missing the opportunity to witness your unique approach to our craft.
Something in his phrasing, unique approach, carried the same subtle dismissal she'd heard from the elders.
There will be other opportunities, I'm sure,
she replied neutrally.
Indeed. Perhaps after our union, you'll allow me to help refine your techniques.
His smile remained pleasant, but his eyes held a glint of something possessive.
Your father has shared that you favor illusion and control over raw power. With the right guidance, such precision could be channeled toward more impactful applications.
With the right guidance. As if her years of dedicated study and innovation were merely preliminary steps toward proper fire magic. His vision of proper fire magic.
I look forward to our exchange of knowledge,
she said carefully. They emerged into Firelight Square, where thousands of guild members and citizens had gathered for the festival opening. The massive stone plaza had been transformed with decorative flame sculptures, floating lanterns, and elaborately costumed performers. At its center stood the Great Pyre, an artful arrangement of rare woods and minerals that would burn for the festival's 3 days in colors no natural fire could produce. As the honored guests appeared, a hush fell over the crowd, followed by enthusiastic applause. Lyra felt countless eyes upon them, the High Councilor's daughter and her soon-to-be husband, the perfect Fire Guild couple representing the perfect Fire Guild values. Her father took his position on the ceremonial platform overlooking the square, raising his hands for silence.
Citizens of Pyreholm,
he began, his voice magically amplified to reach every corner of the vast space.
Tonight, we celebrate the ancient gift of flame, the element that has guided and shaped our guild since its founding. We honor our ancestors who tamed fire's wild nature and forged it into the refined power we wield today.
The crowd murmured their ritual response. The flame endures.
This year's Ember Festival holds special significance.
Her father continued.
Not only do we welcome Archmagus Alek Brightforge of the Inferno Circle as our honored guest, but we celebrate the imminent union of his house with the Embersong line, strengthening our guild for generations to come.
More applause, louder this time. Lyra maintained her serene smile, even as the fire opals at her throat seemed to pulse more insistently. Her father gestured for her and Alek to join him at the platform's edge.
And now to symbolize this union and open our festival, Magister Lyra Embersong and Lord Alek Brightforge will light the great pyre together.
They stepped forward, the crowd falling silent in anticipation. This was no simple matter of tossing a torch. The great pyre's lighting was a complex magical working that required precise control and coordination.
Together?
Alek murmured, extending his hand to her. Lyra placed her palm against his, feeling their magics meet and mingle. Immediately, she sensed the difference in their styles. His power direct and overwhelming, hers intricate and nuanced. When their energies combined, she felt a strange dissonance, as if their magics were meant to clash rather than complement. Yet somehow, he seemed to channel her power, drawing it into his own working with a skill that both impressed and unsettled her. The necklace at her throat grew warmer, its pulses synchronizing with the flow of their combined magic. Together, they extended their free hands toward the great pyre. Lyra began weaving her magic into the traditional pattern, creating pathways through which the fire would dance across the carefully arranged materials. But Alek's contributions surged alongside hers, more forceful than the ceremony required. For a moment, she thought the working would fail, their styles too different to harmonize. Then, surprisingly, the flames caught and leapt higher than she'd expected, erupting in a spectacular display of color and shape. The crowd gasped in appreciation as the fire formed a massive phoenix, similar to her assessment illusion, but vastly larger and more dramatic, before resolving into the steady, controlled burn that would sustain the festival. The applause was thunderous. Beside her, Alek wore a satisfied smile.
Beautiful,
he said, still holding her hand.
You see how much more you can achieve when your precision is paired with true power?
Before she could respond, her father rejoined them, clapping Alek on the shoulder with unusual warmth.
Magnificent display. I've never seen the pyre lit with such artistry and force combined.
The credit belongs to your daughter's technique,
Alek said smoothly.
I merely provided the power to realize her vision more completely.
Doran looked at Lyra with what might have been newfound appreciation.
Perhaps this is the direction your talents have been seeking, daughter. Precision in service to power rather than as an end in itself.
The three of them turned to face the cheering crowd, a perfect tableau of Fire Guild unity and strength. Lyra's smile never faltered, though the necklace felt increasingly heavy against her skin. The great pyre burned before them, its flames dancing in unnatural patterns that occasionally resembled a phoenix in flight. But unlike her carefully crafted illusion, this phoenix's eyes seemed to regard her with hunger rather than majesty. Its beauty underlaid with something predatory. Is this to be my future? She wondered, acutely aware of Alek's hand still clasping hers, his magic subtly entwined with her own through the strange resonance of the necklace. My precision serving his power, my techniques amplifying his vision. She looked out across the sea of faces, all turned toward them in admiration, and felt strangely alone despite being the center of attention. The missing piece she'd been unable to name earlier seemed suddenly, painfully clear. Freedom. The freedom to pursue her magic as she understood it, not as tradition or family or fiancé demanded, but as the daughter of the High Councilor, as the future wife of the Archmagus, as a magister of the Fire Guild. Freedom was the one luxury she could not afford. The fire opals pulsed against her throat, warm and insistent, like a collar slowly tightening. The Ember Festival swirled around Lyra in a kaleidoscope of fire and sound. Performers traced burning sigils in the air while musicians played traditional Fire Guild melodies on heat-tuned instruments. Children ran with sparklers that left trails of golden light hanging in the evening air. The scent of roasting spices and caramelized sweets filled the plaza as vendors called out their wares. Any other year, Lyra would have delighted in the festivities. Tonight, she felt oddly disconnected, as if watching the celebration through wavering heat mirages.
A successful opening ceremony,
Alek said, guiding her through the crowd that parted respectfully before them.
Your father seems pleased.
Lyra glanced to where High Councilor Embersong conversed with guild elders, his usual stern demeanor softened by the success of the display.
Yes, it appears so.
And you?
Alek's fingers brushed the necklace at her throat.
Are you pleased with our combined working?
The moment he touched the central opal, A startling sensation rippled through her. Heat that had nothing to do with the ambient temperature of the plaza. It coursed down her spine and bloomed outward. A sudden flush that left her momentarily breathless.
It was certainly more dramatic than the traditional lighting,
she managed, unsettled by her body's response. Alek smiled, his golden eyes reflecting the great pyre's flames.
Drama has its place in magic, Lyra, as does beauty.
His gaze traveled appreciatively over her features.
You'll find I value both, in different contexts.
Before she could formulate a response, a voice called her name. Zara approached, resplendent in a festival gown of orange and gold, her dark eyes sparkling with excitement.
Lyra, that phoenix was magnificent.
She stopped short, realizing who stood beside her friend.
Lord Brightforge, forgive my interruption.
Alek inclined his head graciously.
No forgiveness needed for such well-deserved praise. You must be Magister Cinderkin. Lyra has mentioned your friendship.
Zara looked surprised and pleased to be recognized.
I'm honored, my lord.
Would you excuse us briefly?
Lyra asked Alek.
There's a festival tradition Zara and I observe each year.
A flicker of something, annoyance, curiosity, crossed his face before his pleasant expression returned.
Of course. I should pay my respects to the guild elders anyway.
He lifted her hand to his lips again.
I'll find you for the midnight procession.
As he walked away, Zara gripped Lyra's arm.
That necklace is extraordinary. And the way you two lit the pyre, I've never seen fire manipulation like that.
Lyra touched the central stone, which still pulsed with unsettling warmth against her skin.
It was unexpected.
The perfect word for everything tonight,
Zara said, pulling her toward a quieter corner of the plaza.
Lord Brightforge arriving early, that magnificent phoenix, and...
She lowered her voice.
Have you heard about the seers?
Seers?
Lyra's attention sharpened.
What about them?
Spirit Guild representatives arrived this afternoon. Very hush-hush. Rumors say they were summoned for a divination, but you know how the fire elders feel about spirit magics.
Indeed she did. Fire and spirit magic were considered particularly incompatible, one rooted in the material world, the other in the immaterial. The guilds maintained a cold diplomatic relationship at best.
Where did you hear this?
Lyra asked.
My cousin works in the diplomatic wing. She said they've been sequestered in the East Sanctum.
Zara's eyes gleamed with the thrill of gossip.
3 spirit mages, escorted directly upon arrival. Very unusual during a festival.
East Sanctum, near her tower study. Lyra filed the information away, curiosity piqued.
Now our tradition,
Zara declared, producing 2 small red paper lanterns from her festival satchel.
What are you wishing for this year?
Every Ember Festival opening, they released wish lanterns into the night sky. A small rebellion against the guild's emphasis on practical magic over superstition. Lyra accepted one, feeling the tiny enchantment waiting to be activated inside.
Same as always,
she said.
Advancement to Tier 1.
Zara gave her a knowing look.
That's your public wish. What's your private one?
Lyra hesitated, the question striking deeper than her friend could know. What did she wish for, beyond the obvious ambitions? The necklace pulsed against her throat again, sending another rush of unexpected warmth through her body, making it difficult to think clearly.
I wish,
she began, then stopped, reformulating.
I wish to understand what's happening to me.
Zara laughed, interpreting the vague statement as bridal nerves.
Cold feet already? With a man who looks like that?
Lyra managed a smile, letting the misunderstanding stand.
Let's release them.
Together they whispered the activation words and released the lanterns. The paper constructs drifted upward, joining hundreds of others ascending from the plaza, their soft red glow forming a second sky of earthbound stars.
Beautiful,
Zara sighed. Then,
oh, I almost forgot. I promised to meet Kieran at the Flame Dancers Pavilion.
She squeezed Lyra's hand.
Will you be all right on your own for a while?
Of course, go.
Lyra shooed her away with a smile.
Give my regards to Kiran.
As Zara disappeared into the crowd, Lyra felt both relief and a deeper loneliness. The plaza teemed with people celebrating, connecting, enjoying the moment without the weight of family legacies or political marriages on their shoulders. The necklace pulsed again, this time sending a wave of heat so intense she had to stifle a gasp. It traveled lower, pooling in her abdomen with an unmistakable sensuality that both startled and disturbed her. This was no ordinary magical artifact. Something in it seemed to be responding to her emotions, amplifying certain reactions. She needed space to think, to breathe, to understand what was happening. Making her way to the edge of the plaza, Lyra slipped down a less crowded side street. The sounds of the festival receded as she walked quickly toward the eastern district where her tower study waited. Perhaps there, surrounded by her books and private research, she could make sense of the necklace's strange effects. The streets grew quieter as she left the main celebration behind. Lanterns cast pools of golden light at intervals, but between them lay deepening shadows as night fell completely. The air cooled, a welcome relief from the press of bodies and the great pyre's heat. As she approached the small courtyard at the base of her tower, movement caught her eye. A figure in dark robes slipping through a side entrance of the East Sanctum. Something about their furtive movements triggered her curiosity. Spirit Guild representatives wouldn't need to sneak around. They'd have official escorts. Lyra hesitated, torn between the sanctuary of her study and the mystery unfolding across the courtyard. The necklace pulsed again, but instead of the earlier heat, she felt a curious pressure, as if it were trying to pull her away from the East Sanctum. That decided her. Anything the necklace seemed to discourage merited investigation. Adjusting the fall of her festival gown to move more quietly, Lyra approached the side entrance. It was unlocked, unusual for any guild building, particularly during a festival when security was tightened. She slipped inside, finding herself in a narrow service corridor lit only by the occasional enchanted sconce. The sound of voices drew her forward. One spoke with the distinctive elongated vowels of the Spirit Guild, while the other... Lyra froze, recognizing her father's measured tones. She edged closer to the partially open door ahead, careful to remain in shadow.
Unprecedented manifestation,
Her father was saying.
4 generations of Embersong ancestors appearing simultaneously.
And you're certain they weren't conjured?
Asked the Spirit Guild voice.
Fire magic has illusory capabilities.
My daughter is our most accomplished illusionist.
Her father replied, sounding irritated.
Even she couldn't produce such a working, particularly not during her own engagement announcement.
Engagement announcement? Lyra frowned in confusion. The formal ceremony wasn't until 2 days from now. Unless...
Show me where it happened,
said the spirit voice. Footsteps approached the door. Lyra quickly backed into an alcove, drawing shadows around herself with a subtle manipulation of the nearest sconce's light. Her father and a tall, lean man in the silver-gray robes of the Spirit Guild passed within inches of her hiding place. Once they had turned the corner, Lyra followed at a careful distance. The necklace at her throat had grown uncomfortably warm again, but now it felt restrictive, as if tightening minutely with each step she took in pursuit. They led her to the Hall of Ancestors, a sacred space where the Fire Guild conducted its most solemn ceremonies, including engagement rituals. Its massive doors stood ajar, unusual for a room that was typically sealed when not in ceremonial use. Lyra waited until they had entered, then crept forward to peer through the gap between the doors. The vast circular chamber beyond was illuminated only by the eternal flame that burned in a basin at its center. The walls, lined with countless ruby and amber memorial plaques commemorating notable fire mages, glinted in the flickering light. Her father and the spirit mage stood at the chamber's center, beside the eternal flame.
It happened here,
Her father said, gesturing to the ceremonial circle inscribed in the stone floor.
During the private family blessing, before the public announcement, we had just invoked the traditional ancestor witness when, instead of the customary single manifestation, 4 appeared.
The spirit mage circled the area slowly, his eyes taking on the clouded appearance Lyra had read about in her forbidden texts. The sign of a seer accessing the spirit realm.
There's a disturbance in the veil here. Recent and powerful.
Can you tell what they were trying to communicate?
The spirit mage shook his head.
Not without a proper reading. And not alone.
He turned to face her father directly.
This is why I requested my colleagues join me. What you're describing, multiple ancestral manifestations appearing unbidden, suggests an urgent message from beyond. Something the dead believe the living must know.
Her father's expression was difficult to read in the dim light, but his voice carried rare uncertainty.
The words they spoke, they made no sense. Warnings about the Crown of Cinders and enslaved flames. Old legends, nothing more.
The spirit mage's response was sharp.
All legends have foundations in truth, High Councilor. Particularly those that prompt the dead to violate the natural order to deliver warnings.
Lyra's breath caught. The Crown of Cinders. She had seen references to it in her historical research, though details were scarce. An ancient artifact, supposedly lost during the early wars that had led to the guild system's establishment. The necklace at her throat pulsed painfully now, the sensation no longer pleasurable but constricting. She reached up to touch it, wondering if she could remove it, but found her fingers unable to locate the clasp that had been there earlier. Inside the chamber, her father had begun pacing.
Lord Brightforge arrives a day early, and now this complication. The engagement ceremony is in 2 days. I cannot have spectral warnings disrupting what must be a perfect political alliance.
With respect, High Councilor, if your ancestors risked the immense energy required to manifest simultaneously, their warning takes precedence over politics.
You don't understand the delicacy of this situation.
Her father snapped.
The Embersong Brightforge alliance will strengthen our guild's position for generations. Lord Brightforge's research into ancient fire techniques promises to elevate our standing among the elements.
The spirit mage's voice cooled.
And if that research involves artifacts your ancestors are specifically warning against.
A tense silence followed.
The Crown of Cinders is a myth,
her father said finally.
A story told to apprentices.
Then why did your ancestors invoke it by name?
When her father didn't answer, the spirit mage continued.
We need to conduct a proper seance. My colleagues and I can open a controlled channel to the ancestral spirits and...
No.
Her father's tone brooked no argument.
No public seance. The Fire Guild does not conduct its business through spirit magic.
Then what did you summon me for?
The spirit mage asked, frustration evident. Her father was silent for a long moment.
Your discretion,
he said finally.
And your expertise, privately applied.
Understanding dawned on the spirit mage's face.
You want me to investigate without the knowledge of your guild elders, or your future son-in-law.
I want answers without political complications.
Her father corrected.
You would be compensated generously, of course.
The spirit mage considered.
I cannot work alone on something of this magnitude. I need at least one of my colleagues.
The younger one,
her father decided.
Not the elder. He has too many political connections.
Cassius, then.
The spirit mage nodded.
He is our most gifted seer, though somewhat unconventional in his methods.
Can he be trusted to be discreet?
When it suits his purposes.
The spirit mage said with a wry smile.
He has little interest in politics, but a profound interest in magical anomalies. This situation would intrigue him.
Her father nodded decisively.
Make the arrangements. He'll pose as a diplomatic envoy to avoid suspicion. I'll ensure he has access to the family archives and
He hesitated.
my daughter's assistance.
Lyra nearly gasped aloud. Her assistance?
Your daughter?
The spirit mage sounded surprised.
Is she aware of what happened?
Not yet, but she's knowledgeable about family history and has research skills that may prove useful. Moreover, her involvement will appear natural, educational preparation for her role as Brightforge's wife.
The calculated way her father referred to her, as a useful tool, an asset to be deployed, sent a chill through Lyra that countered the necklace's persistent heat.
And when do you plan to tell her about this arrangement?
The spirit mage asked.
After tomorrow's dinner with Lord Brightforge, I see no reason to...
The sentence cut off as a loud crash echoed from somewhere deeper in the building. Both men turned toward the sound.
Security patrols.
Her father said.
We should conclude this discussion elsewhere.
They moved toward a different exit, leaving Lyra alone in the corridor, her mind reeling with revelations. Ancestral warnings. The Crown of Cinders. A secret investigation involving a spirit guild seer who would be working with her. She backed away from the doors, intending to retreat before anyone discovered her presence. As she turned, the necklace flared with sudden, intense heat that stole her breath. The sensation was no longer just physical. It carried a magical compulsion that tried to push against her thoughts, urging her to forget what she'd heard, to return to the festival, to focus on Alek and their engagement. Lyra staggered, clutching the wall for support as she fought the foreign magic attempting to invade her mind. Her own power rose instinctively to defend her, creating a barrier of carefully controlled fire energy that isolated the necklace's influence. Lyra staggered back from the door, one hand pressed against the necklace that now seemed to burn against her skin. The heat wasn't painful, but intensely distracting. Waves of warmth radiating outward from the central stone, making it difficult to focus on what she'd just overheard. The Crown of Cinders. Ancestral warnings. A spirit seer named Cassius who would be working with her. Another pulse from the necklace sent a rush of sensation through her body. A flush of heat that settled low in her abdomen with unmistakable intent. The feeling was so incongruous with her current situation, hiding in a darkened corridor, eavesdropping on her father, that she immediately recognized it as unnatural. The necklace is doing this, she realized, her analytical mind cutting through the enchantment's fog. Alek's gift is affecting my thoughts, my reactions. From outside came the sound of her name being called. Alek, searching for her. The necklace pulsed again, stronger, as if responding to his proximity. This time, the wave of warmth threatened to overwhelm her rational thoughts, replacing them with an artificial yearning to return to him. Lyra gritted her teeth and drew on her years of precise magical control. She envisioned her own fire, clean, controlled, responding only to her will, and used it to create a barrier between the necklace's magic and her mind. It was similar to a technique she'd developed after studying that Forbidden Spirit Guild meditation text, though she'd never expected to use it against jewelry. The mental shield wavered, then steadied. The necklace's heat remained, but its compulsive influence receded slightly. Enough for her to think clearly again. Footsteps approached from around the corner. Guards, from the rhythmic sound of their boots. She needed to move quickly. Gathering her festival gown close to prevent it from rustling, Lyra slipped down the corridor away from both her father's meeting and the approaching guards. Her extensive knowledge of the guild complex served her well. This passageway connected to a service stair that would lead her to the upper level, and, from there, she could circle back to the eastern tower. As she climbed the narrow stairs, the necklace's influence seemed to fade with increasing distance from Alek. By the time she reached the upper gallery, her head felt clearer, though the strange heat continued to pulse against her skin in unpredictable waves. Lyra moved silently along the gallery, past the shadowed alcoves where junior mages often hid to observe the political dealings of their elders. From below came the sounds of preparations for tomorrow's diplomatic reception. Servants arranging furniture, guild officials discussing seating arrangements. She found the door she sought. A small exit leading to an exterior staircase that would take her directly to the courtyard near her tower. As she descended, the festival sounds grew louder. Music, laughter, the occasional burst of applause for some fiery display. Twice she had to flatten herself against the wall as search parties passed below. Her absence had been noted. She caught fragments of conversation.
High Councilor's daughter. Lord Brightforge is looking. Check the Eastern District.
Finally reaching the courtyard, Lyra used every shadow and decorative pillar for cover as she made her way to her tower. The ruby-flecked stairs recognized her magical signature and dimmed their telltale glow as she ascended. Another of her personal modifications that her father would certainly disapprove of if he knew. Inside her study, she secured the door with both physical lock and magical wards before sinking into her desk chair, her heart still racing from the close escape and the disturbing revelations. The necklace pulsed again, stronger now that she was stationary, as if trying to regain its influence over her thoughts. Lyra fumbled at the clasp, her fingers searching for the mechanism that had seemed so simple when Alek fastened it earlier. She couldn't find it. Where the clasp had been, there was now only smooth metal, as if the necklace had sealed itself around her throat.
A binding enchantment,
she muttered, recognizing a sophisticated working that exceeded even her knowledge of fire artifice. This was no mere diplomatic gift or romantic gesture. The necklace was a tool. For what purpose, she could only speculate. But given what she'd overheard about ancestral warnings and forbidden artifacts, nothing benign came to mind. Lyra moved to her bookshelf, selecting several volumes on magical jewelry and fire enchantments. The necklace's heat intensified as if objecting to her research, sending another inappropriate wave of warmth through her body. She gritted her teeth and reinforced her mental barrier. For the next hour, she pored over the texts, comparing references to enchanted gemstones with what she was experiencing. None matched exactly, but she found disturbing parallels to loyalty charms and desire enchantments. Magic that had been banned by all guilds centuries ago for their violation of personal autonomy.
Is that what you're doing, Alek?
She whispered, fingers tracing the central opal.
Ensuring your bride's compliance?
The stone pulsed as if in answer, sending another unsettling wave of heat through her. Despite her mental barriers, her body responded to the enchantment with growing intensity. Her skin felt too sensitive, her breathing shallow, her thoughts continuously redirected toward Alek's handsome face, his impressive magical prowess, his status and power. Lyra shook her head violently, breaking the spiral of enchanted thoughts. This was not natural attraction. This was manipulation. Subtle and sophisticated, but manipulation nonetheless. She tried various counter-enchantments from her collection of books, but nothing affected the necklace. It remained seamlessly fastened, its stones glowing within her fire that responded to her increasing frustration by intensifying their heat. Eventually, exhaustion began to overtake her. The evening's events, the assessment, the festival, the ancestral warning, the necklace, had drained her both magically and emotionally. Her mental barriers were weakening, allowing more of the enchantment's influence to seep through. Reluctantly, she prepared for bed, changing from her festival gown into a sleeping robe of light silk. Even the fabric brushing against her skin felt unnaturally intense, another effect of the necklace's persistent arousal enchantment.
Tomorrow,
she promised herself as she extinguished the lights with a gesture.
Tomorrow I'll find answers.
Lyra lay in her bed, staring up at the ceiling where shadowy reflections of the city's nighttime fires danced. The necklace continued its pulsing rhythm against her throat. Gentler now, but still present. As her consciousness began to fade, Her last thought was a determination to discover the truth about the Crown of Cinders, about her ancestors' warning, and about her fiancé's true intentions. Then dreams took her. She stood in the Hall of Ancestors, before the eternal flame. Its light cast everything in shades of gold and amber, creating dancing shadows that seemed almost alive. The hall was empty save for her, and him. Alek Brightforge emerged from behind the flame, his copper-gold hair gleaming in the firelight, his broad shoulders accentuated by robes that seemed to be made of living flame itself. His golden eyes reflected the fire, giving them an almost supernatural glow.
Lyra,
he said, his voice deeper than in waking life, resonating through her body like the toll of a distant bell.
I've been waiting for you.
He moved toward her with fluid grace, each step emphasizing his height and the powerful build beneath his ceremonial robes. His hands, when they took hers, were warm and strong, fingers calloused from years of practical magic use rather than theoretical study.
You disappeared from the festival,
he said, drawing her closer.
I was concerned.
In the dream, she couldn't remember why she had avoided him, could only focus on the striking features before her. The strong jaw, the sculpted cheekbones, the confident set of his mouth. His physical presence was overwhelming, making it difficult to think of anything but the heat radiating from his body, and the strength evident in his firm grip.
I needed to think.
Dream, Lyra heard herself say, though the words felt distant, disconnected from her will.
Think later,
Alek murmured, one hand rising to touch the necklace at her throat. The opals flared with inner fire at his touch, sending cascading waves of heat through her dream self.
Feel now.
He pulled her against him, and she felt the hard planes of his chest through the thin material of her dress. A different dress than she remembered wearing, revealing in ways her actual wardrobe never was. His arms encircled her waist, muscular and secure, making her feel delicate despite her own considerable strength.
You're mine,
he whispered against her ear, his breath sending shivers down her spine.
We'll reshape the world of fire together.
His lips found hers, and the kiss was exactly as a maiden's fantasy would imagine it. Passionate but controlled, demanding but giving. His hand tangled in her flame-red hair, tilting her head back to deepen the kiss while the other splayed possessively across her lower back. The necklace burned against her skin, its magic pulsing in rhythm with her racing heart as Alek's hand moved lower, tracing the curve of her hip, pulling her more firmly against him to feel the evidence of his desire.
Together,
he murmured against her lips.
We'll harness powers forgotten for centuries. The crown awaits us, Lyra. The crown of...
Lyra bolted upright in bed, chest heaving, the dream shattered by the sudden intrusion of that name. The crown. Even in her enchantment-induced dream, Alek's true focus had revealed itself. The necklace pulsed against her throat, seemingly agitated by her abrupt awakening. Dawn light filtered through her tower windows, revealing that she had slept through the night despite her troubled thoughts. She pressed a hand to her forehead, trying to separate the artificial desire created by the necklace from her genuine concerns. The dream lingered in her mind. Alek's commanding presence, his strength, the passion of his kiss. But now awake, she could recognize it for what it was. A fantasy constructed from the necklace's enchantment, rather than her true desires. What disturbed her most was how her dream had ended. Not with romantic words or tender promises, but with talk of power and the Crown of Cinders, revealing perhaps the necklace's true purpose. Not just to create artificial affection, but to align her goals with Alek's ambitions. Lyra rose from bed, her determination renewed. Whatever game Alek was playing, whatever her father was hiding, whatever her ancestors had risked themselves to warn about, she would uncover the truth. The necklace pulsed once more against her fingers, but this time, instead of heat, she felt something else. the subtle crack of a flaw running through the central stone, as if her awareness of its purpose had somehow damaged its enchantment. Lyra smiled to herself, a small, private expression of defiance. For years, she had crafted fire into beautiful, but ultimately meaningless displays to please others. Perhaps it was time to discover what else her carefully honed precision could accomplish when directed toward a purpose of her own choosing. For the first time in years, the predictable path of her life had veered into unknown territory. The emptiness she'd felt earlier had been replaced by something equally uncomfortable, but infinitely more energizing. Uncertainty. Danger. Purpose. As she slipped into the festival crowd, blending with other celebrants to mask her return, Lyra touched the fire opals at her throat. They remained warm, still attempting to influence her emotions, but knowing their purpose had given her the power to resist. 2 days until the engagement ceremony. 2 days to uncover the truth about Alek, about the Crown of Cinders, about the mysterious violet-eyed spirit seer who had just upended her understanding of her carefully arranged future. The necklace pulsed once more against her fingers, but this time, instead of heat, she felt something else. The subtle crack of a flaw running through the central stone, as if her awareness of its purpose had somehow damaged its enchantment. Lyra smiled to herself, a small, private expression of defiance. For years, she had crafted fire into beautiful but ultimately meaningless displays to please others. Perhaps it was time to discover what else her carefully honed precision could accomplish when directed toward a purpose of her own choosing. The midnight procession would begin soon. Alek would find her. She would smile and play her role, the perfect bride-to-be, the dutiful daughter, the proper Fire Guild Magister. But behind that carefully maintained facade, something new had ignited, a determination that burned with greater purpose than any magic she had wielded before. And like the crack in the enchanted opal, once begun, it would only spread. The private dining hall in the High Councilor's residence gleamed with morning sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, depicting the Embersong family's historical achievements. Ancient tapestries hung between the windows, masterpieces of fire-resistant silk, woven with golden thread that captured and reflected light in hypnotic patterns. Lyra paused at the threshold, hearing voices from within. Her father's measured tones, Alek's confident baritone, and another voice, female and familiar, Zara. Her presence at a family breakfast was unexpected but welcome. Drawing a steady breath, Lyra entered, her steps measured and silent on the polished volcanic stone floor.
Ah, daughter, at last.
Lord Embersong didn't rise from his position at the head of the long table. His formal morning robes of dark crimson gave him an imposing presence, the High Councilor's medallion glinting at his throat.
Lord Brightforge was beginning to wonder if you'd forgotten our engagement.
Alek stood immediately, his smile warm as his eyes traveled over her with appreciative intensity.
Never that. Good morning, Lyra.
He moved to pull out her chair, the one directly across from Zara and adjacent to his own.
You look radiant, despite your early departure from the festival last night.
The necklace pulsed once against her skin as he drew near. Lyra reinforced her mental barrier, keeping her expression pleasantly neutral.
A minor headache, nothing more. The excitement of the day proved overwhelming.
Understandable.
Alek conceded, returning to his seat once she was settled.
The opening ceremony was particularly stimulating.
The double meaning was subtle enough that her father wouldn't catch it, but Lyra felt the implication like a physical touch. She turned instead to Zara, genuine pleasure warming her voice.
I didn't expect you this morning.
Zara, resplendent in a morning gown of amber silk that complemented her olive complexion, shrugged with the casual grace that had always made her stand out among the formal Fire Guild elite.
High Councilor Embersong suggested I might provide feminine companionship before the ceremony's preparations consume your time.
Her dark eyes held Lyra's momentarily, telegraphing that there was more to the story.
How thoughtful,
Lyra said, glancing at her father with carefully masked surprise. He was not known for such considerations.
Magister Syndican's presence will be beneficial during today's diplomatic engagements,
her father said, signaling to the servants to begin serving the meal.
Her experience with cross-guild protocols will be useful.
Zara's background suddenly made sense. Her mother was a liaison between the Fire Guild and Earth Guild, giving Zara experience with diplomatic proceedings that most fire mages lacked. But why would her father need such expertise today specifically?
Speaking of diplomatic engagements,
her father continued, as servants placed silver trays of morning delicacies before them. Fire fruits whose spicy sweetness was enhanced by careful magical cultivation. Pastries dusted with ember sugar that sparkled with actual tiny flames. Smoked meats prepared with traditional Fire Guild spices.
There's a matter we should discuss.
He gestured dismissively, and the servants withdrew, leaving the family and guests alone. Unusual, her father typically kept staff present during meals to demonstrate his status.
An anomaly occurred during the private blessing before your engagement announcement,
he said, his voice carefully modulated to sound unconcerned, though Lyra detected the underlying tension she'd grown skilled at identifying.
One that requires discreet investigation.
Lyra took a sip of spiced morning tea, using the moment to compose her response.
What sort of anomaly, Father?
Doran's eyes flicked briefly to Alek, then back to her.
Several Embersong ancestors manifested simultaneously during the ritual. It was unprecedented.
How fascinating,
Lyra said, feigning polite interest rather than the sharp curiosity she actually felt.
What did these manifestations communicate?
Nothing of significance,
Alek interjected smoothly, reaching for a fire fruit and slicing it with precise movements of his table knife.
Spectral apparitions are often confused, even nonsensical. A magical curiosity, nothing more.
Her father's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly at the interruption.
While Lord Brightforge's assessment is correct about most manifestations, the Embersong line has historically maintained unusual clarity in death. Our ancestors appeared with purpose. Speaking of...
He hesitated.
An ancient artifact.
The Crown of Cinders,
Lyra supplied, unable to resist using the knowledge she'd gained through eavesdropping. All three other occupants of the table looked at her with varying expressions of surprise.
You're familiar with the reference?
Her father asked sharply. Lyra maintained her composure.
I've encountered mentions in my historical research. A magical artifact from before the guild system's establishment, supposedly capable of amplifying fire magic beyond normal constraints.
She turned to Alek with practiced innocence.
Given Lord Brightforge's known interest in ancient fire techniques, I assumed the reference might be relevant to our union.
Alek's golden eyes narrowed slightly before his expression smoothed into appreciation.
Your scholarly thoroughness continues to impress me, Lyra.
He reached across to touch her hand lightly.
Though I confess the crown is little more than a legend in most texts I've studied.
The necklace warmed at his touch, sending a wave of heat through her that she now recognized as artificially induced. She maintained her mental shield while offering a modest smile.
Most legends contain kernels of truth.
Indeed,
her father said, watching their interaction closely.
Which is why I've taken steps to investigate further.
He set down his utensils with deliberate precision.
I've engaged the services of a spirit guild seer.
Father!
Lyra's exclamation of shock wasn't entirely feigned. She hadn't expected him to reveal this information so openly, especially not in front of Alek. Zara's eyebrows rose dramatically, though she remained silent, watching the family dynamics with keen interest.
A spirit seer?
Alek's voice had cooled considerably.
Surely fire divination would be more appropriate for investigating Embersong ancestors.
Fire divination reveals the future, not the past.
Doran replied firmly.
Spirit seers can communicate directly with the deceased. If our ancestors risked the energy required for multiple manifestations, their message deserves proper interpretation.
The separation of guilds exists for good reason,
Alek said, his tone carefully respectful despite the challenge in his words.
Mixing elemental magics has historically led to instability.
I'm aware of the risks.
Doran said stiffly.
The seer will be operating under strict constraints, posing as a diplomatic envoy to avoid public speculation. His investigation will be brief and discreet.
Lyra observed this exchange with fascination. Her father wasn't simply informing Alek of his decision. He was asserting his authority as both High Councilor and future father-in-law. And Alek's resistance suggested the ancestral warning had struck close to something he preferred to keep hidden.
When does this envoy arrive?
Alek asked, his earlier warmth noticeably diminished.
Today,
Doran answered.
My daughter and Magister Syndikin will serve as his official guides, providing him controlled access to family records while maintaining appropriate supervision of his activities.
Now Zara's presence made sense. Her diplomatic experience would help navigate the complicated politics of hosting a Spirit Guild mage in Fire Guild territory. She would be part of this investigation, which sent a rush of relief through Lyra. Having an ally she trusted would be invaluable.
I see.
Alek said, the words clipped.
And have you informed the Council of Elders about this unorthodox approach?
Her father's expression hardened.
As High Councilor, I have latitude to pursue matters of family security without full council approval.
The tension between the two men grew palpable. Lyra exchanged a brief glance with Zara, who gave an almost imperceptible nod in return, an old signal from their academy days, indicating she'd noticed the undercurrents too.
Perhaps,
Lyra suggested, adopting the diplomatic tone she'd learned from years of mediating her father's more contentious guild council meetings.
Lord Brightforge could contribute his expertise to the investigation. His knowledge of ancient artifacts could provide valuable context for interpreting the ancestors' message.
Her suggestion served multiple purposes: easing the immediate tension, appearing supportive of her fiancé, and potentially gaining insight into how much Alek truly knew about the Crown of Cinders. Alek's expression softened as he turned to her.
A thoughtful compromise, as always. Your diplomatic instincts serve you well, Lyra.
The compliment was sincere, though she detected a note of calculation beneath it.
I would indeed be interested in meeting this spirit seer, and perhaps guiding his interpretation of spectral communications.
The necklace pulsed against her throat, a warning she now recognized. Whatever Alek's interest in the crown, he clearly didn't want unfiltered ancestral warnings interfering with his plans.
Excellent,
her father said, though his tone suggested he found the compromise anything but.
The envoy will be received in the diplomatic wing at midday. Lyra, you and Magister Syndikin will escort Lord Brightforge to the meeting.
Of course, father.
Lyra took another sip of her tea, using the cup to hide her expression. This arrangement would allow her to observe both Alek and the Spirit Seer's initial interaction, potentially revealing.
In the meantime,
Alek said, his pleasant demeanor restored.
Perhaps you might show me your research collection, Lyra. If we're to discuss ancient artifacts, I'd be interested in which historical texts you've consulted.
The request sent a chill through her that countered the necklace's persistent warmth. Her private collection included forbidden texts from other guilds, knowledge that could compromise her position if discovered.
My daughter's mourning is already committed to festival preparations.
Her father intervened unexpectedly.
The Ember procession tonight requires her presence for rehearsal. Perhaps another time, Lord Brightforge.
Lyra carefully masked her surprise at her father's intervention. Was it mere coincidence, or did he somehow know about her illicit library?
Of course.
Alek conceded smoothly.
The festival takes precedence.
He turned to Zara with practiced charm.
Perhaps Magister Syndikin might show me the festival preparations instead? I'd value understanding more of Pyreholm's traditions before I become part of its leadership.
Zara's smile was perfect. Warm but professionally reserved.
It would be my honor, Lord Brightforge.
Excellent.
Alek said, rising from the table with fluid grace.
If you'll excuse me, I have correspondence to attend to before our meeting with the envoy.
He He bowed slightly to Doran, then took Lyra's hand, brushing his lips against her knuckles.
Until midday, my dear.
As soon as the dining hall doors closed behind him, Zara let out a breath.
Well, that was intense.
Indeed.
Doran said dryly. He fixed Lyra with a penetrating gaze.
Your knowledge of the Crown of Cinders is convenient.
I researched thoroughly before making commitments.
Lyra replied, meeting his gaze steadily.
Even marital ones.
A hint of approval flickered across her father's face before disappearing.
Your thoroughness serves us well in this instance. The spirit seer will require context that doesn't come from guild propaganda.
About that,
Lyra said carefully.
Why reveal your plans to Lord Brightforge? If you suspect the ancestral warning might concern him.
I suspect nothing specific.
Her father interrupted sharply.
And keeping secrets from your future husband would create unnecessary complications. Better to present this investigation as routine diligence, with nothing to hide.
Zara leaned forward slightly.
And my role, High Councilor, beyond chaperoning?
Doran regarded her thoughtfully.
You have your mother's talent for navigating cross-guild sensitivities. Use it. Observe Lord Brightforge's reactions to the spirit seer. Note any inconsistencies.
You're asking me to spy on the Archmagus of the Inferno Circle,
Zara stated bluntly.
I'm asking you to protect your friend's interests.
Doran corrected, his gaze shifting to Lyra.
And the interests of our guild.
The admission that he needed allies, even junior ones like Zara, revealed how seriously her father took the ancestral warning. High Councilor Embersong never admitted weakness or sought assistance unless absolutely necessary.
I understand,
Zara said simply.
Good.
Doran stood abruptly.
The spirit seer's name is Cassius Nightshade. He's young for his position, but reportedly gifted. He'll be arriving through the eastern gate to avoid public scrutiny.
He looked directly at Lyra.
Prepare the small conference room in the diplomatic wing. Bring your notes on guild history, particularly regarding artifacts from the pre-separation era.
Yes, Father.
He moved toward the door, then paused.
That necklace, Lord Brightforge's gift, it's quite distinctive.
Lyra's hand rose unconsciously to the fire opals at her throat.
Yes, unique craftsmanship.
Her father studied it for a moment longer than comfort allowed.
Indeed, wear it for diplomatic functions, but perhaps not for the meeting with the spirit seer. Some spirit guild members find fire opals distracting.
Before she could respond, he swept from the room, leaving her and Zara alone. The moment the door closed, Zara moved to the seat beside Lyra, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper.
What in the blazing hells happened last night? You disappeared from the festival, guards were searching everywhere, and now there's spirit mages and ancestral warnings and your father asking me to spy on your fiancé.
Lyra glanced toward the door, then murmured a quick privacy charm, one of her own design that created a bubble of displaced sound around them. It wouldn't stop a determined eavesdropper, but it would blur their conversation to casual listeners.
It's complicated,
she said, touching the necklace.
And dangerous.
Zara's eyes widened as she took in the implications.
Start talking, right now.
Lyra described her accidental eavesdropping, the ancestral manifestation, and her discovery of her father's secret consultation with the spirit mage, carefully omitting any mention of her suspicions about the necklace itself. Even with Zara, she wasn't ready to share that vulnerability.
4 ancestors appearing simultaneously?
Zara breathed.
That's not just unusual, Lyra. That's practically unheard of. It takes enormous spectral energy.
I know.
Lyra had read enough forbidden spirit texts to understand the significance.
Whatever they were warning about, it must be dire.
And this Crown of Cinders, you've actually researched it? I thought you were bluffing.
Partially,
Lyra admitted.
I've seen references in historical texts, but they're frustratingly vague. An artifact from before the guild system was established, supposedly capable of amplifying fire magic in some way. Most scholars dismiss it as legend.
But your ancestors didn't,
Zara pointed out.
And neither does Lord Brightforge, judging by his reaction.
She leaned closer.
Did you notice how quickly he tried to dismiss the manifestation as meaningless? Before he even knew what they said?
I noticed,
Lyra confirmed, impressed by her friend's perceptiveness. This was why she valued Zara. Beneath the fiery personality and social charm lay a keen mind that missed little.
And my father noticed too.
Hence the spirit seer,
Zara concluded. She studied Lyra's face carefully.
There's more you're not telling me.
Lyra hesitated. Zara had been her closest friend since their earliest academy days. They had shared secrets, covered for each other's minor transgressions, supported each other through guild politics and family pressures. If anyone deserved her complete confidence, it was Zara. And yet, the necklace's manipulation was so intimate, so invasive, that admitting it aloud felt like exposing a wound she wasn't ready to acknowledge.
There's more,
Lyra agreed carefully.
But some of it I'm still figuring out myself. I need to understand what's happening before I can explain it properly.
Zara looked dissatisfied but nodded reluctantly.
Fair enough. But promise me you'll be careful, Lyra. If your ancestors risked that much energy to deliver a warning, and if your father is concerned enough to bring in spirit mages secretly.
She left the sentence unfinished, but her meaning was clear.
I promise.
Lyra squeezed her friend's hand.
Having you involved helps more than you know.
Well, someone has to keep you from disappearing into your books and missing the actual conspiracy happening around you,
Zara said with a flash of her usual humor. Then, more seriously,
what do you want me to do while I'm showing Lord Brightforge around the festival preparations?
Pay attention to what he asks about. Anything related to guild history, ancient magic, artifacts, and...
Lyra hesitated.
If he mentions the necklace he gave me, note his exact words.
Zara's eyes sharpened with interest, but she didn't press.
Consider it done.
She glanced at the clock on the dining hall wall.
We should go. If I'm to show your charming fiancé around and still help you prepare for the spirit seer's arrival, we need to move quickly.
Lyra dispelled her privacy charm with a gesture.
Thank you, Zara, for everything.
Save your thanks for after we figure out what's actually happening,
Zara replied, rising gracefully.
And Lyra? Whatever it is your ancestors were warning about, whatever Lord Brightforge may be hiding.
She met Lyra's eyes directly.
You're not facing it alone.
The simple statement touched something in Lyra that had been lonely for longer than she cared to admit. In a life governed by political calculations and guild obligations, genuine friendship was rare and precious.
I know,
she said softly. And for the first time since discovering the necklace's sinister purpose, she felt something beyond determination and fear. She felt hope. They left the dining hall together, separating in the main corridor. Zara to meet Alek for the festival tour. Lyra to prepare the diplomatic wing for the spirit seer's arrival. As she walked toward her tower to collect her research notes, Lyra mentally reviewed what little she knew about Cassius Nightshade. Young but gifted. Unconventional in his methods. Uninterested in politics but fascinated by magical anomalies. A potentially valuable ally, if she could trust him. But trust was a luxury she couldn't afford to extend without evidence. Not with her engagement ceremony approaching. Not with her fiancé potentially manipulating her through an enchanted necklace. Not with her ancestors breaking spectral laws to deliver desperate warnings. For now, she would observe, gather information, and prepare. The spirit seer would arrive at midday, bringing either clarity or complications to an already precarious situation. The necklace pulsed once against her throat, as if sensing her thoughts. Lyra reinforced her mental barrier and continued walking, outwardly composed while her mind raced with possibilities. 2 days until the engagement ceremony. 2 days to uncover the truth about the Crown of Cinders. Woe days to decide her future. She touched the tiny crack in the central opal, a physical manifestation of her growing resistance to its influence. A small victory, but significant. Perhaps the first of many, if she played this dangerous game correctly. The morning sunlight streamed through the corridor windows, casting her shadow long against the polished stone floor. A single figure moving with purpose through the heart of the Fire Guild's power. Alone, for now, but not for long.